Our first speaker is Ross MacDonald with Regeneration Canada. Ross's topic is going to be Grasslands, the gold standard of regeneration. Ross MacDonald is a professional agrologist, a board member of Regeneration Canada, and is a student of grassland ecology, horses, dogs, and livestock. He owns and operates 98 Ranch Incorporated with his wife, Christine Peters, located on Treaty 4 territory in Saskatchewan. It is a cow-calf, yearling, and grass-fed operation built on a foundation of grassland health and low-input cattle selection, converting forages into beef while facilitating grassland ecology function, including soil health, increasing effective precipitation, wildlife habitat, and biodiversity. Ross also works for Ducks Unlimited Canada on the habitat management team. As an advocate for regenerative agriculture production systems and also strives to do better. I welcome Ross.
One with the rock. The one with the rock. Yeah, that's the one. So how does the clicker work? Just forwards and back. Okay. I always wanted to do that. So thanks. I always wanted to the other night I was working on my presentation. I was thinking, well, how do I start this presentation? How do I lead into it? You know, I thought, I don't know that I've ever started a presentation with a really awkward pause. So thank you for playing along. That was fantastic. Actually, you could sort of feel the intensity of the room build a little bit. So anybody who hasn't done that intentionally, it's kind of cool. Thanks. So before I dive into framing native grasslands in sort of a regenerative context and speak about my passion about that, I just want to say thanks to the CFGA. I've been engaged in livestock production and grassland conservation. Really, it's been my whole life since I graduated from high school, for the most part, and I'm extremely passionate about it, but have been frustrated to no end in the recent decade with some of the resistance within industry circles to have frank and open discussions about the value of these systems as the world's demands are changing and where these systems fit. So to CFGA, I say thank you for encouraging these conversations. It's wonderful, and I applaud you. So there's a lot going on in this picture. Another kind of awkward, silent moment there. Good, that's kind of what I was hoping for. It'd be terrible if that was a flop. Why I stuck that rock, I like rocks, and I also like lichen. So for those of you who don't, I'm pretty sure Heather understands that. But for those of you who don't understand that, lichen is the organism that's eating away slowly at that rock and colonizing it and providing the opportunity for that needle and thread plant down there in the crevice of that rock to gain a toehold, and really exemplifies in my mind either that, or maybe I was just out there too long in the sun, but exemplifies the sort of the theme of the conference: the risk management, the opportunity, and really ties in the notion of where I see grasslands, specifically native grasslands that I operate on within a regenerative context. And that's sort of where I hope to take you today. So it wouldn't be a regenerative agriculture presentation if there wasn't some reference to a soil profile. So this is a soil profile on one of our pastures, and I bet you I've driven past, ridden past, walked past this road cut for at least 35 years, I think. Be pretty close. Probably the first time I rode out there, I was probably 12, 13, something like that. This wasn't my place then. It was a friend of ours. And really it's only recently that this road cut started to have sort of more meaning, or more I understood the context maybe of this road cut a little bit more deeply. And part of that is I'm hoping I'm becoming a better listener. And I'm going to read you a series of thoughts, ideas that have impacted me and hopefully can tie them together. As long as the sun shines and the grass grows and the river flows. So that's in reference to the treaty negotiations between the First Peoples of Turtle Island and the Canadian government. So reference to grass, and maybe I've been thinking about that a lot, thinking maybe that's a pretty good summary and a pretty good understanding for forever, hopefully. But maybe it's also a statement that if those things don't exist, maybe the tree doesn't mean anything because we don't want to be here. So hopefully it's a forever statement. Grass is the forgiveness of nature, her constant benediction. Forests decay, harvests perish, flowers vanish, but grass is immortal. That was J.J. Ingalls, who was a senator in Kansas in 1872, I think, fresh out of the Civil War, and sort of captured by the expanse that laid before him. It's a land-based culture that recognizes and adheres to the natural carrying capacity of the ecosystem it inhabits. It's not human-centric, and it doesn't disregard the role of other species. The context for that was spoken by Philip Brass, who's from the Papikasis First Nation Treaty 4 territory. My ranch is also in Treaty 4 territory. I don't really know Phil that well, but I've heard him speak a couple of times. And each time that man speaks, I come away with statements that stick. And it especially sticks in light of today's awareness following the truth and reconciliation discussions and where we're at with that, especially given the fact that I have prided myself as being a steward, an owner, a lessee, a grazer on native grasslands. And when you are in a discussion with somebody referencing their indigenous culture and that direct tie to that landscape, and you are a direct beneficiary through the colonial system of ownership of that landscape, you can either choose to ignore it, which is really easy where I live, because there aren't any First Nations really close. Or in my case, you get pretty reflective on where that puts you in the future. And as I've been wrestling with these thoughts, a couple of years ago, I had the opportunity to go to Texas to a friend of mine's place and start some colts. And I was on this really touchy colt. And this guy is world renowned, probably one of the best horsemen in the world. And I'm sitting on this pretty touchy colt for the first time. And I'm really nervous because I'm thinking, man, I'm going to be like painted on the side of this round pen. And he of course could tell all of that, but he could also tell the horse would really notice. And what stuck with me out of that was wait for it, Ross. Wait for it. If you listen closely enough, you'll feel what that colt is going to do. Now, it relaxed me, also relaxed the colt. Luckily, I didn't end up on the dirt. And I've been thinking about all of these statements mixed up in my head, you know, as you're fixing fence, checking your cows, driving down the road, going to another meeting, driving down the road, doing some work for ducks. And all of these thoughts have been mixed around in my head. And the combination of them, I believe, apply to the land, and they apply to the cattle that we interact with. And if we can be quiet enough mentally to just listen to what the land is telling us. The hard part is being confident enough to listen. I know that was the hardest part for me at several levels. Some of that comes with age, I'm discovering. And it's wonderful that this group, the presentations that are given at this group, all have an undertone of that listening. And I think that's wonderful. And even though we may not understand the questions that we need to ask, we'll get there if we listen. Now, you might be saying, Ross, that was kind of deep. Got borderline emotional there. Well, I thought you were talking about native grassland as the gold standard for regeneration. Like, where are you going, dude? I'm guessing one or two of you might be wondering that. And so to sort of bring it to the context of the grass is within regenerative agriculture, all of agriculture and this evolution that we're undergoing. It's really easy to jump into the tools, and it's really to jump into, we should do this, we should do that. And I find myself, the more experience I have, pulling back a little bit more and trying to listen better to what's going on in the land. And I took this picture last summer, you know, after several years of going through COVID and sitting through a million webinars, filling my head with a whole bunch of really great presentations, and being mentally in alignment with a lot of the concepts and practices, and just fantastic. What I realized is I needed to listen more. And so I've started trying to actively pay more attention to the things on the grasslands that we're fortunate enough to steward that maybe make the difference. And this picture where the red iPhone arrow is pointing to is a good example of that. You know, quite often we want to get down into the soil profile and look at the color changes there. But from a grassland standpoint, from a land management standpoint, from an environmental stewardship standpoint, it's this top layer on here that the red arrow is pointing to that is so often overlooked and has been a huge frustration of mine. And early on, I don't know, how long ago, Bart, was Western beef still a thing?
2018 we transitioned.
Yeah. So, okay. In that neighborhood, it was right in that transition period. I was starting to do a lot of reading on the word regenerative agriculture was popping up in a lot of the US trade magazines that I listened to and, or that I read. And I was noticing in John Deere's publication, The Furrow, chock full of regenerative agriculture articles. Fascinating to me. And the more I read, the more I realized this is grassland ecology. That's really what's going on here. It might be in the context of a cornfield or a tame hay plot or some combination of those things or an intercrop. But really, when you look at the reference point for where we're at, it's what's in this picture, or where we want to go. It's in this picture. It's the grasslands before they were tilled. It's the grasslands before they were eroded. And that's sort of where I came up with this. And I was feeling pretty brilliant at that point. So I had some discussions with some good friends of mine about this, who I thought, you know, were like grass guys and we're in the same stuff and we like horses and cows. And it's like, yeah. So we're talking about having a pretty there may have been some scotch involved, having a pretty in-depth conversation about some of these dynamics. And I started using the word regenerative agriculture. Man, talk about a buzzkill. And I bumped into that a few times. I bumped into that with some of my neighbors who are hardcore annual croppers. Very similar buzzkill. And we've got a neighbor that has a big ranch. I'm not a multi-generational rancher. I'm not a big ranch. These guys are like big multi-generational, sort of the textbook, what every young rancher aspires to head towards. And even they were sort of giving me the stink eye over the references to regenerative agriculture. And I thought, man, what is going on? You're sitting on like tens of thousands of acres of the most regenerative ecosystem in this area we live in. How can you? And then it hit me. It's because he didn't look at it that way. What he saw when I said the word regenerative agriculture, the picture he saw in his mind is cover crops and intercropping. And yeah, maybe see some alfalfa occasionally. But the notion or the principles of the concept really not very well understood in those conversations. So I thought, well, okay, definitely not as smart as I think I am. That is not the first time that's happened, let me tell you. So I started to think about how can I reframe how I think about this and how I communicate these concepts. And about that same time, a good friend and mentor of mine made me aware of Regeneration Canada. Now, Regeneration Canada is only about 5, coming on 6 years old. Is that how old we are? I think. Was pretty Montreal-centric at its beginnings. And I've been on the board 3, coming on 4 years now. And a lot of those early discussions were fascinating, not very regenerative discussions, really early discussion. I'm talking about the personal discussions. And what I realized is there's a whole network of people across this country that are interested in the concepts that ecosystems like grasslands provide. They just maybe don't understand how it's applicable. They may understand how it's applicable within a community supported garden or a small acreage plot. They definitely didn't understand how it could be applied sort of at scale on the prairies. And so it was a really good education for me on how to better communicate how I fit within their context, but also to try and bring my context to them. And what this organization has done is I've been connected with a couple of organizations in my life, fortunately, that have done things intentionally in terms of their communications and their internal relationships that most people take for granted. But as a corporation or as a not-for-profit, they have intentionally included aspects to their company that have allowed people to feel extremely open in their discussion, especially when the discussions get difficult. And you want to have a really difficult discussion online, and I'm sure some of you have, or many of you may have, is you take a bunch of community supported gardeners from Montreal and put them on Twitter with some large scale Durham farmer from the prairies and start debating the merits of glyphosate use in soil biology, right? And that's just reality. That's where we're at. So it's not as though we can't have those conversations. They need to be had, but they need to be had in a respectful, moderated, productive setting. And so what I discovered pretty quickly is Regeneration Canada was full of a bunch of people who were really interested in a lot of the same things I was interested, even though we had never met, we're multiple provinces away, pretty sure there was probably not the same love for beef cattle that I have. But the expectations from where the country is going and where agriculture is going and where they want to have influence on the food system and be a part of climate change solutions was all the same. So how exciting was that? And intentionally moderated with respect and openness to other ideas. So that's why I'm here today as a director of Regeneration Canada, is to sort of help tie together, you know, the context that I come from and how it fits within Regeneration Canada. Now, this is a slide on the principles of regenerative agriculture. And I love this slide, not because of the depiction. The depiction's great because I think we could probably all see ourselves in there. And whoever was the artist on this did a wonderful job capturing a tremendous amount of detail and connection. Okay. And what I love about this are the principles, because every time I go through these principles, when I'm out there staring at the rocks and liking the lichen and lamenting the noxious weeds that are creeping in, every time I go through there and I roll these principles through my head, it's like check, 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 check. Native grasslands, the gold standard for regeneration. And so this is my context. And I don't know how many of you have watched videos of Gabe Brown. I've met Gabe once. I don't know him, but I love it. Gets a little bit nasally sometimes. And I noticed in his early on in their presentations, there wasn't a lot of discussion about context. But I think once they started traveling bigger circles, the word context really started to appear. And because it's a little bit nasally, it's like, you got to know your context. And Gabe's only about 5 hours away from where our ranch is. So we're in a very similar environment. He's got more valley bottom, but it sticks in my head. You got to understand your context. So this is my context. We're definitely brown, some on the edge of transitioning to dark brown soil, dry, southern Saskatchewan. This is right on the 49th parallel, just south of that little knob hill. There is 49th parallel. And because Cedric called the East Coast his coast, I'm going to call this my border. So this is my border. This is some land that we graze that's recently acquired. We helped the Nature Conservancy buy it, and we have a grazing agreement on it as part of our larger rotation. But it's a beautiful landscape. But what I'm discovering is the more I have the capacity to listen to what I'm seeing, the more of this I see. The cows and the horses are absolutely a huge part of it and a driver. But checking off those other boxes from a regenerative context and a communication context with consumers and other interested Canadians. The opportunity to share that's an echinacea plant on the edge of the one valley that we have. So that's echinacea, like immune boosting echinacea, native in our area on some of the valley sides. There's a big fat northern leopard frog down in that's that green blob there. So he was probably 30 to 50 feet outside of the water hole, hunting grasshoppers, and that's late summer out there. Pretty fascinating to see those guys rolling around. The orange and black beetle is a burying beetle, and that's a manure pat that he's hanging out on. And the burying beetle, I really didn't know anything about them. Found a bunch of them in a mineral tub that had a dead gopher in it, sort of at the far reaches that had blown into the pasture. And it's just full of these little orange and black beetles. So it's like, well, what are these guys? So they're a burying beetle. And there's a great quote if you look up some of the insect information on them about these burying beetles, how their job is neither fragrant nor desirable, but crucial to ecosystem cycling. So when I listen more closely to the landscape that I'm on and try to understand how my implications or my actions on the land are being communicated through that grassland. When I see feedback like this, the beetle on the manure pat, there wasn't anything dead close by. There was in past, but not recently. I think they probably cleaned that up and then we're looking around for other activity. The northern leopard frogs, the echinacea, the lichen is what the shadowy picture is. You got to listen a little closer to, one, appreciate lichen, and two, see it. This is late October on a piece that it was like frosty in the morning, and then we had crazy 22-degree heat in the middle of the day, and it was dry. We've been dry for 5 years. But this lichen, which in the middle of the day is just brown and desiccated, in the frost of the morning, in the shade of a fence post, this lichen captures that moisture and is part of the soil biology. When I'm listening and seeing these feedbacks, this communication back to me, that's what gets me excited. And these concepts are really why I think the native grasslands in this country so undervalued, yet so crucial, because they can still teach us so much. And so I just got the flash. I've got 2 hours left. Is that, are we good? And so that, great landscape picture. However, really what I listen to more is the principles, and am I hitting those principles, and is the feedback I'm getting, am I on point? Because those give me the common speaking notes. Similar dynamics. I don't know this young woman, but her boyfriend phoned me to see if they could hunt on some of the land we graze. So she harvests that nice mule deer this year, and that's elder Pete Bigstone from the Ocean First Nation. And we're doing a treaty land sharing walk on some of the grass. And again, definitely speaks to the symbiosis of the reciprocity with humans and nature. And native grasslands are such a key part to that. So just a quick run through on hopefully I've painted a sufficient enough picture as to why native grasslands are important, and why next time you hear the word regenerative agriculture, you're going to think, oh yeah, we're measuring that all against native grass. It's the gold standard. We're there, I think. So Regeneration Canada as an organization has an amazing capacity. Ali and Paige are here today, staff members. They're at the booth. They're really the ones that put the really highly educated, capable wheels under the bus, and pull off some amazing events and pull off the trainings, the conferences, the research partnerships. And not only do they hit the deliverables, but they hit the deliverables way above the bar. There are events that you attend and you think, oh, that was good. And then there are events that you attend that think, wow, that was amazing. Ali has been responsible for a couple of those events, and it's humbling to be a part of. So thank you to the staff. This is Regen Canada has this map. It's available online. We've got a number of layers. I think there might be opportunity to integrate a lot of RC's work and the map tool into some other dynamics, multi-purpose connection to the consumer, connection between producers. Really gives you an idea of the breadth of activity going on across the country, and the supply value chain transition projects have really taken the organization and allowed it to move from sort of a shoestring budget and a few staff to an organization that's running pretty hard and turning out some pretty major deliverables on some pretty fantastic budgets. So those are all exciting to be a part of. It's an example of the, I know I'm out of time. I'm just going to test your, how Canadian are we, right? Like, are you going to throw me off the stage? Give you an idea of the network of regenerative stories that the staff pulled off this summer. And so I just want to say thanks. Thanks again. And this slide really encapsulates the energy and the momentum that's happening within Regeneration Canada. And so the opportunity to be part of this conference and tell our story is awesome.